certain historical figures based, as my character is, loosely on certain historical figures, but using them as a launching pad to explore other ideas. I think if you have writers who are as careful and considerate as the writers that we have on Boardwalk, I think you're able to take full license if you do it with respect and do it within the parameters of the history, which is what we try to do. We're just trying to tell the story, basing it on some of the dynamics, some of the language, some of the aspirations of the community at that time. So I'm loving it. And it really gives you deep roots to kind of sink your character into. So out of that, you can do some pretty interesting things.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. The character of Dr. Narcisse, Narcisse, excuse me. That character is a little bit different from the other African American characters on the film. What was your inspiration behind the character? It's a very interesting character.
My inspiration? Well, he's drawn from a historical figure named Casper Holstein, who was the first major numbers runner in Harlem in the early 20s, but he's a distortion of Holstein. Holstein was one of the biggest philanthropists of his day, one of the benefactors of the Harlem Renaissance, major financial supporter of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. But Dr. Narcisse is not so nice. He plays at that game, but essentially he's a charlatan, and a scoundrel, and he's kind of a joy to play. But so the inspiration really just came. The inspiration comes from these fantastic scripts that I'm being fed.
And yes, I saw that he would speak of African Americans as Libyans. Was this something that was written in the script, or did you add that particular?
No, I'm not adding anything. That's all taken from language of the Harlem Renaissance, language of Marcus Garvey and Black nationalist movement. So the writers of the show really paying a lot of attention to the historical detail. And although this is a hard show, this is not. We're not trying to, we're not singing We Shall Overcome here. We're telling stories from the perspective of gangsters, but there's a great deal of respect and homage being paid to this particular time in Harlem, which was an incredibly significant time in African American history. So it's a real joy for me to be able to shape a character that wraps himself around those dynamics and around a part of our history that hasn't been explored to the extent that it might be, because it's one of the most exciting periods, certainly in New York, and maybe one of the most exciting periods in the history of African American culture.
My last question from me: do you think that Dr. Narcisse and Chalky will eventually come to some sort of union, if you will, or will they be butting heads throughout their involvement with one another?
That remains to be seen.
I see the wry smile.
That remains to be seen.
She is the new chanteuse in town, so it's exciting because that kind of music in the 20s is something that I followed for a lifetime, and jazz in general is just something that's so beautiful. So I'm really happy to bring some of that music to this show and this season. Recording, I could say one big thing, when I recorded some of the music for the show, one of the biggest differences was recording with a full band and everyone just kind of together, and I think that sounded the most organic and true to the times. As to now, when you record separately and you overdub things and you get a couple chances, we did a couple hits of the song all together, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times, and that was all I got.
Were you a fan of Boardwalk Empire prior to getting the role?
Of course, I was a big fan. I had a lot of friends that were on the show, so I watched a couple episodes. I wasn't watching the full season, but I finally got a chance to sit down and get HBO and get my DVR out and make sure that I was caught up on all the seasons. So I'm a huge fan.
What is it like dressing up and going back in time and playing in a period piece?
I think dressing up and putting on the clothes just kind of puts me in the right mentality and mode where I need to be. The 20s and jazz and music at that time, it was everything, and that kind of sound is something that I crave. So it's been a dream.
Lastly, all of the characters on the show, many of them start out innocent, but then they lose that innocence. Do you foresee your character losing her innocence anytime soon?
I don't know.
Could you describe, is there a commonality in preparation between these varied roles from varied time periods that you were able to master?
Well, the first thing I do my research. I find out who the character is. What's his good points, his bad points, and I try to humanize him as the person as a whole. I don't try to demonize anything. I don't try to. You have to bring humanity to everything. Everybody's a human being. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody came from a mother. So I try to put those basic realities into every character I do, no matter how menacing they may appear to be.
Chalky White is fast becoming a human in my eyes. First he was a bloodthirsty murderer. Now he's becoming more and more human the more that I watch. Could you describe what that process is like, making this character grow as we go along?
This process, Chalky, for me has a special place in my heart because in my mind, it's an homage to my ancestors. And all my late uncles, my father, who had they been alive, they would have been like in their late 80s, early 90s, so they know about this time. And so, I feel grateful, humble that I've been given this opportunity to pay homage to them.
Okay, they died before Tom. Could you describe what it was like preparing for that as opposed to Chalky White?
They Died by Dawn is a Western. First of all those characters are real people. I play Nat Love, excuse me, and that was a real lesson in history. We don't know about the Black Cowboy, very little. What went on in Langston, Oklahoma. So to prepare for that, it was surreal. You put it in the wardrobe. You go to the Wild Wild West in the middle of the desert in LA, and then you had James Samuel writing these awesome words. It was like a no-brainer. It was very easy to get into character.
Lastly, with the success of Boardwalk Empire, is there room for anything else? Is there anything else coming down the line that we can expect you in?
Oh yeah, there are a few things that's simmering on the store right now that I can't speak about.
Okay.
But you can look for me in the October release of 12 Years a Slave, directed by Steve McQueen.
I didn't realize you were.
And in February of 2014, I am starring in the reboot of RoboCop.
That's what's up.
What's up, brother?